Remember those who conquered. We glorify the sounds of battle, the strategy, the sacrifice, the wins. But here's the paradox. The loudest victories are not always the greatest ones. The greatest victory, bravest one, is peace. Now that may sound counterintuitive in a world where we equate strength with aggression, success with domination, and leadership with control. But let's go deeper. True peace, lasting peace, isn't achieved by avoiding conflict. It's achieved by facing it courageously. Intentionally, peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of understanding. In every great leader I've studied, from Mandela to Gandhi, from Martin Luther King Jr., to those unsung heroes who held their families together during war, there was one thread in common. They had the courage to choose peace when war would have been easier. They had the bravery to pause when retaliation was expected. They didn't seek to crush their enemies, they sought to transform them. When we think of bravery, we often picture battlefields, raised voices, and bold declarations. And we associate courage with charging forward, taking action, and refusing to back down. But there is a kind of bravery that often goes unseen, quiet, steady, and deeply powerful. That is the bravery of choosing peace. In a world that glorifies winning through dominance, choosing peace can feel countercultural, but real strength isn't about how loudly you can yell or how quickly you can strike. It's about how intentionally you can remain calm, especially when every emotion inside you wants to fight back. War is often reactive. It's driven by fear, pride, and a need to prove something. Peace, on the other hand, requires you to rise above those instincts. It takes strength to look someone in the eye who has hurt you and not let her anger define your next move. It takes maturity to stay composed when you're misunderstood, and it takes character to extend grace when revenge would be easier. We live in a culture where the person who gets the last word is seen as the winner. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not respond at all, to sit in the discomfort, to not need to be right, to seek to understand instead of retaliate. That's real courage, because peace isn't passive, it's active. It's a decision made over and over again, often against your own ego, and always with the future in mind. The truth is, anyone can fight. Anyone can argue. It doesn't take much skill to escalate a conflict, but it takes true strength to de-escalate it, to be the one who breathes instead of bursts, to be the one who builds instead of breaks. Peace requires vision. It requires emotional intelligence. It requires the bravery to say, I refuse to let this moment pull me into a cycle of destruction. That's why peace is the bravest victory, because it's not about defeating someone else. It's about mastering yourself. And when you do that, you don't just win a battle, and you win your freedom, you win trust. You win the kind of influence that inspires, not intimidates. And in a world full of noise, that kind of leadership is rare and desperately needed. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to react. When someone insults you, when something doesn't go your way, when pressure builds up, reacting is almost automatic. But reaction is instinctual. It's what happens when we allow emotion to lead us without pause. Leadership, however, is not about reacting. It's about responding. And the difference between the two is where true peace is born. Real leaders understand that their job isn't to be the loudest in the room, but to be the most intentional. They know that reacting with anger or fear might feel powerful in the short term, but it rarely leads to lasting results. Responding requires discipline. It requires you to take a breath, gain perspective, and choose action that reflects your values rather than your ego. Leaders who choose to respond instead of react send a powerful messaging. That piece is more important than pride. This is where strength becomes visible, not in domination, but in self-control. Anyone can lose their temper. Anyone can lash out. But it takes wisdom to listen. It takes maturity to wait. And it takes courage to seek understanding before judgment. We often think leadership is about being right, about taking quick action and making bold decisions. But some of the most powerful leaders in history didn't win through force. They won through patience, vision, and the ability to unite people rather than divide them. They didn't need to humiliate others to feel strong. They led from a place of empathy and purpose. They didn't feed conflict. They transformed it. When you respond instead of react, you create space for clarity, space for respect, for peace. And peace doesn't mean weakness. It means you're strong enough to rise above chaos and choose a better way forward. You show people that calmness is a form of control, and that silence can be strategic. And that true leadership isn't about having power over others, but having mastery over yourself. So the next time you're challenged, the next time your buttons are pushed, ask yourself, am I reacting out of ego or responding with intention? That moment of choice is where leadership begins. And that choice, every single time, is what separates those who lead with fear from those who lead with peace. Peace is not something that magically appears when conflict disappears. In fact, real peace is often forged through conflict, not around it. It's a common misconception that avoiding difficult conversations or pretending problems don't exist will lead to harmony. But that kind of peace is fragile. It's surface level. It's the kind of quiet that comes just before a storm. Lasting peace, meaningful peace, is built by confronting challenges with courage and seeking understanding even when it's uncomfortable. Facing conflict doesn't mean becoming aggressive. It means becoming brave enough to step into tension with the intention to grow, to connect, and to find common ground. It means saying, we may not agree, but I respect you enough to hear your side. It means recognizing that behind every strong opinion is often a story, pain, fear, or life experience that shaped a person's worldview. And it is only through understanding that story that we begin to make progress. When leaders avoid conflict, they don't create peace, they create resentment. Problems don't disappear when ignored, they fester. But when leaders invite open dialogue, when they ask questions instead of giving commands, when they seek clarity instead of blame, they begin to cultivate trust. And trust is the foundation of all real peace. Think about the relationships in your own life. The ones that are the strongest aren't the ones with the least disagreement. They're the ones where you feel safe to be honest. That safety comes from someone willing to face conflict with you, not against you. And the same is true in teams, families, communities, and nations. Peace doesn't live in silence. It lives in understanding. It takes far more strength to say, help me understand where you're coming from, than it does to yell, you're wrong. The first leads to connection. The second leads to division. And in a world already full of noise and disagreement, what we need are more people willing to do the hard work of understanding. So if we want peace that lasts, we must choose to lean into the discomfort. We must be willing to sit at the table with people who challenge us. Because only when we face the conflict can we rise above it. That is where real peace begins. And that is the kind of peace worth fighting for. Bravery is often measured in grand acts. Standing up to an enemy, speaking truth to power, or making difficult decisions in high-stakes situations. But some of the most powerful acts of courage are quiet, unseen, and deeply personal. Choosing peace in small, everyday moments is one of those acts. And it's in these moments, when no one is watching, when emotions are raw, and when you could easily justify a harsh word or cold silence, that true bravery reveals itself. It's brave to listen instead of interrupt. It's brave to apologize first, even when you weren't entirely at fault. It's brave to let go of a grudge, to choose forgiveness over revenge, to soften your heart when everything in you wants to build a wall. These actions don't make headlines, but they shape lives, they shape relationships, they shape communities. And over time, they shape the world. Peace isn't always about ending wars on a global scale. Sometimes it's about ending a silent war within a marriage, a friendship, or a family. Sometimes it's about choosing not to respond to a rude comment online. Sometimes it's about walking away from an argument, not because you've lost, but because you've decided your peace is more valuable than your pride. These choices take strength. They go against our instincts, against the pressure to be right or to win. But that's what makes them brave. When you choose peace, you choose growth over ego. You say to yourself and to the world, I don't need to tear someone down to feel strong. I don't need to create conflict to prove I exist. And here's the beautiful thing. These small acts of peace have a ripple effect. When you lead with kindness, you give others permission to do the same. When you stay calm in chaos, you create stability. When you choose empathy over judgment, you model what real strength is like. You don't just make peace, you inspire it. So never underestimate the power of your choices. Every time you choose peace, no matter how minor it seems, you are being brave. You are breaking a cycle. You are building a better world. Not with force, but with wisdom. Not with noise, but with grace. And that more than anything is the kind of victory the world desperately needs.